One of the most frustrating parts of modern front-end development is having to build and manage internal APIs, GraphQL or otherwise, for an app to fetch its own data from. I've spent hours reading documentation and prototyping with a new technique that seems promising, and I'll show you how to set it up in no time. Server rendering or server-pushed patterns like Phoenix Live View work well and keep the JavaScript complexity out of the way. But there are times where a full React or Vue front-end are necessary. Maybe there's a specific component library you want to use, or your users have a high latency connection. Teams with these constraints tend to either spin up an entire front-end application and turn their backend into APIs, or go all in on JavaScript with the library of the week. I think it's Remix, but it might be React Router or Remix again. I don't even know. But developers who have chosen Phoenix for their backend have a new option, by way of the Laravel PHP community and an Elixir package recently published by the folks behind SavvyCal. It's called Inertia. Inertia blurs the lines between APIs and monolithic view controllers by putting routing on the server, data fetching in a controller, interactivity through JavaScript, and refreshes through backend fetches. There are a few steps required to get Inertia and React to cooperate with Phoenix, so I'm doing something different. I committed this setup step by step, all available on GitHub with a link in the description. But before I get to that, I want to show what's interesting about Inertia. I've got a sample app open, basically a Hello World app. On the server side, I assign props, like place is set to world, and then over on the page, it automatically gets passed into my component, so that I can use it in render. This means that I don't have to perform any API calls before presenting information to the user. When I click on a link, Inertia intercepts the request and makes it with a fetch with the X-Inertia header, getting JSON back. If I open up my network tools, I can see this request to the groceries page, and, well, there's no HTML that came back. Instead, what we get in this information is what component needs to be rendered and what props should be passed to that component. In this case, 3 items on a grocery list and the list groceries component. If I go over to my JavaScript, I can see my list groceries component and see that it uses that groceries prop. If instead I refresh this page, I get HTML, and in that HTML, there is a data page attribute. And this is what's used to hydrate and mount the application. It's also possible to fetch data through the Inertia router via its router.visit method. Going back to this hello world, let's say that I want to load some facts about the planet. What I can do is use this only attribute, which lets you specify which props to fetch from the server, including ones that may not have been included on the original request. So in this example app, I've marked facts as lazy. But when I click this load facts button, Inertia makes a request to my controller and signals that it wants that specific data. If I take a look at the request that was associated with that button and look at the request headers, I can see that we were looking for the data of facts and we're making an Inertia request. And in response, I only get the facts back. It's not going to reload the place property. It's just loading what I told it to. This is great for data that's expensive to compute or not used very often. And the best part is I didn't have to build an API for that data. It was sitting in the very same route in the very same controller that rendered the page. There's also great support for forms in Inertia, but I wanted to pause and show how this repo got here. So here's the repo on GitHub, and obviously the first step was to install the Inertia package. This is its listing on HexDocs, and it's pretty thorough, but it was missing a little bit on the JavaScript side. Next, I had to import a couple of helper modules and a plug. The plug is important because it allows the controller to seamlessly adapt between returning HTML and partial JSON for navigation. The heart of this front end is app.jsx, which calls create Inertia app and takes a resolve function to load a page by name. At first, I decided to just import the pages through a barrel import. When I started worrying about JavaScript bundle sizes, I enabled ESBuild's splitting feature and switched to an asynchronous import statement. This lets me have separate JavaScript bundles per page while keeping common content in the main bundle. But in reality, you should probably just copy a repo that has all this set up and get to work. On that note, let's walk through the grocery list. To build the grocery list feature, I ran a Phoenix context generator, causing a grocery schema to be created. It was important to make this schema serializable, so I derived the JSON encoder protocol and specified the fields that should be included. If this were a user, for example, I'd want to make sure that I'm returning their name or their email, but not their password hash. Similarly, in this, I want to return the ID, the name, and the quantity. Then I set up a controller, all very basic stuff. Notice that the create method is able to convert an ecto change set into Inertia errors. In fact, let's intentionally fail validation by not including a name. I'll go over to the grocery list, add item, and submit. This can't be blank error message comes from the change sets validation. All that I had to do was consume an errors object. The form itself is being managed by a use form hook that tracks the form's state, whether it's processing, any errors, and it provides a method to send the form data somewhere. When I submit the form, I'll post it to the groceries route. When that post succeeds, we get redirected to the grocery list. Let's do that now. Now I'm brought to the grocery list page, and that's because in my controller, on success, I redirect to that grocery list. This feels like some of the most productive React I've written in quite some time. Inertia provides simplified routing and data fetching patterns that allow monolithic applications to use React frontends without having to go all in on JavaScript. For most common data access, specialized APIs don't have to be built, but just because you have Inertia set up, that doesn't mean you can't write your own fetches or even connect to Phoenix channels for signaling or presence. The Laravel community has had Inertia for years, existing alongside Livewire. I'm grateful to the team at SavvyCal for open sourcing an adapter for Phoenix so we can have another tool in our toolbox. There's a million things I couldn't get to in this video since React opens up a whole world of interactivity. But hopefully this has been enough to get you started. This has been Code and Stuff. Thanks for watching.